Welcome everyone to Life of Emerald Studio, gathering world-class leaders in psychology, spirituality, medicine, business, and governance. We help corporate workers worldwide reduce stress by providing strategies on how to take care of the mind, body, and soul health. We uplift humanity. Our sacred guest is Chinedu Echeruo. Hi, Chinedu.
Hi, Kate. Nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you too. Thank you for coming to our studio.
I'm delighted to.
Chinedu is a serial entrepreneur from Nigeria who has dared to invent the future. In 2005, he founded HopStop, the pioneering travel app that helped millions of users navigate public transportation in major metropolitan areas around the world. He is a co-founder of the Love and Magic Company, a startup studio and an inventor of US patent for methods for navigation in urban environments. You can follow his thoughts on LinkedIn. Chinedu, where are you calling from today?
I'm in New York now.
Yes. Do you guys have spring now?
Yeah, which my 2-year-old twin boys reminded me just 2 days ago. Yes, we are officially in spring, and the city is slowly coming back to life with this hopefully passing pandemic.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Chinedu, and you?
I'm in Seoul, Korea, and we have spring here. It's been warm and light, fluffy. The vibration here, it's fluffy here.
Okay. Okay. Maybe that's the upside of global warming.
Well, there's the upside of meditation.
Yes.
So Chinedu, for our audience, I would like to ask you some questions today. So let's share with our audience how you contribute your talent and time to the world.
How do I contribute my time to the world? I guess by trying to figure out how I can be useful, which isn't it's hard sometimes to know how you can be useful, but and it's a reality, or it's a recognition that I think I had almost, relatively recently. I think maybe 5-6 years ago, when we started the Love and Magic Company. Like what is contribution? Like, to even frame that question comes with the idea that your life should be about contribution, right? Like, and so I think my recognition that that really the way I could be most helpful to the world is by applying my imagination more intentionally, and to go from a place of reckless use of imagination to a much more conscious use of imagination. And the area of, I think, of application that I think I'm most interested in is that of creation, of abundance. Like, what is the puzzle of abundance? Because if we can figure that out, then I think it's just party time for everyone. It's like goodness for everyone. Lack of scarcity ends in a very real way, not just materially, but I think also spiritually, or from a consciousness perspective. So that's kind of my focus. Solving creation by breaking down what the physics of alchemy, as I say sometimes, like that. That's my passion. That's my interest.
I love the idea of party time for everybody, with abundant resources for everybody, fairly shared throughout. And it sounds like you advocate for poverty alleviation. I read some article about that is one of your passion. Could you say a little bit more about the abundant creation, creative use of imagination, and how do we globally uplift global poverty?
Yes. Okay. So as you mentioned, I grew up in Nigeria, and I think I was around 8 or so. And I found this book in the house. So my dad's a professor of English, so we had always had lots of books in the house. But I remember reading this book about rabbits and reading how they had so many children. They would just have, they procreated so much. And in my 8-year-old mind, I just imagined that the solution to Africa's hunger problem. So I went and asked my mother, who was like my bank manager then. In fact, my bank said, "Can I have all my money, because I want to buy rabbits, and if I buy rabbits and I'll have so many of them, then Africa's hunger problem will be over." So believe it or not, she actually gave me the money. I went to the local markets, obviously with an employee of the house, and we bought 2 rabbits, and we found a carpenter, and we built a cage in the back of our house. So I put those 2 rabbits in there, and they chased each other, but nothing happened, So the rabbits died. We stopped using the cage. But I think I've always had this sense that the way to solve real human problems of not having to eat, hunger, is through some business, some way to create abundance, like some system that creates abundance, that solves problems. So I think that's always been inside the way I thought. And when we moved to the United States, you go from a place of very, very limited abundance, Nigeria, at least materially, and then you come to America, right, where you see this like cornucopia of abundance, everything available all the time. And then you wonder, well, what is it about the American system or the Nigerian system that's so different? And at the end of the day, you really think it goes back to America, through its policies, has unleashed human creative capacity. And cultures and societies that restrain that innate human propensity to create have bad economies. So economies that use force against their citizens, that restrict connections and commerce between people, that don't connect their citizenry, are poor countries. And obviously there's a scale to freedom and the free markets, but I think I definitely see our ability to create with each other as the low-hanging fruit for human abundance. And the more we can interact with each other and co-create with each other, it's literally how we create wealth. We create wealth by interactions with each other. So.
Wow, that is deep. I hadn't thought about that. The creativity being the factor why American economy is so abundantly flowing. And your company is called Love and Magic, and you advocate for creativity. And the more we co-create with other people, other partners and other collaborators around the world, there is the sense of piling up on idea that gets better and better and better. And at Stanford, we speak about design thinking models. And this is, definitely validating the fact that abundance do come when we co-create with other people. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome. But it's just, for me, it's obviously I've been thinking about this question for a very long time. It's almost, it's like, where does abundance come from? And it's surprising that in even in business school, right? And I don't think I think the level of precision and we've used in the languaging of economic growth, of wealth, of abundance, is so imprecise. It's so imprecise. So what I've tried to do is to be more rigorous in that thinking. And from a first principles, from a physics perspective, what we call wealth is manifested imagination. That's, so what we, so basically, maybe this is one way of framing it, framing the difference between countries that, or societies that have abundance and those that have scarcity. So one way of framing that is the ease or the friction in which their citizenry, human beings, can manifest their imagination. And societies that make that process of creation, of manifestation easy, create wealth. Countries, communities, companies that constrict that propensity towards our imagination don't do as well. So maybe that's one way of framing it. But with that language, with that way of thinking, it just we almost realize that it's the constraints that's holding us back. Every time there's ever an issue in the world, whenever there's ever a scarcity, it's just because there's been some constraints of human imagination. There's some possibility that isn't being isn't allowed to flow because there's some friction. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, for example, everybody wants to promote entrepreneurship. Jobs, 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 right? Jobs, jobs, jobs. But politicians talk about jobs, jobs, jobs. But like, how does that wealth come? Where does it come from? Because I mean, we bring companies into different cities, but how does that abundance come? And so maybe framing it as, how does the entrepreneur who has this idea, who wants to create this thing, what is the friction between their imagination and their current state, right? Just simple question. Then all of a sudden, it just becomes clear what policy should be. Because if the friction of creation is where abundance, where the friction to abundance, then all we have to do is to let the floodgate, open it up, let it flow, let people manifest their imagination. So once we frame it like that, and the question is, why isn't our collective imagination flowing? Why isn't that wonderful idea you have, Kate, coming into reality today, right? Then all of a sudden, okay, perhaps there's information about how to do it. Perhaps there's information about the types of investors who would be interested in such a project. Maybe it's a lack of understanding of how to find the customers that want that thing you are going to build with your imagination. So it just becomes not easy, right? But it becomes, we can now frame our policies in a very simple way, right? What is the friction in helping people's stories come true? Simple as that.
Yeah, simple. It's simple and yet complex. When we look at education system, especially in Korea, we are taught to memorize this, don't question teacher, you sit and learn and absorb. And that really blocks the creativity. So this is a really unique approach, and I didn't expect the worldview of wealth abundant creation tied to governance and education and our innate ability to create from our imagination. And Albert Einstein, there's a floating quote around the internet, whether he said it or not, imagination is more important than knowledge.
Yes, yeah. And so perfect example, right? So you have Newton, right? You have Einstein, you have the most brilliant men and women in this world, right? Talking about imagination, right? Talking about the things that at least in the business context, not that we look down upon it, but we only take it seriously when the person is a billionaire, right? But the spring in which that imagination comes from, we don't discuss. It's when I was in business school at Harvard, there wasn't a class called applied imagination, and I think there should be one. Because that's where it comes from. Jeff Bezos had a cognition, had a thought, had an imagination in a different space-time, so to speak, right? And through his actions, he went through that friction of making that imagination, that possibility come true. And I think, so he's very successful, but we're all creators, right? We can't help but create, whether we want to create happy families or beautiful projects or wonderful entrepreneurial successes. We can't help but create, right? We can't help but create. So if we allow ourselves to like get to those possible states of imagination, then we open up this floodgate in so many ways.
I welcome the floodgate to open up for abundance in our society. Well, Chinedu, tell us one or two personal story which has shaped your worldview today, besides that beautiful rabbit story.
Okay, interesting. I remember as a kid, and this was probably I think I was probably 9, 10 then, but my brothers and I, actually probably even earlier than, my brothers and I would actually turn off the lights and just dream. We would imagine ourselves building these elaborate structures under the ocean, like literally entire cities. And we had these, like we had such a vivid imagination as kids. But I think I've always had that sense, but I didn't really understand it. And as I said, my path in life went through going through kind of the traditional hedge fund, Wall Street career path. And for me, what I needed to do was figure out how to make money and maybe get married and have children, and that was life. But I think as you go through this experience, you start thinking that maybe this is just a play of some kind. You almost wake up, right? And I think that happened to me just before starting the Love and Magic company. I woke up and I saw everything as a play. I would look at people, I'm like, wow, they're playing a doctor. And so I think that was like an interesting point. Then I realized, okay, if this is a game, what's the best type of game? What's the most epic adventure you could have in this life, right? What could that be, right? So, and it's and it's a life of abundance, of alchemy, of love and magic, and that's really where Love and Magic came from, because as kids, you come up with this kind of, you have a sense of, you have a box, so to speak, or you have a circle, right? And then all of a sudden, once you jump out of that box, you realize there isn't a box, right? There isn't any structure, that this whole human experience is this wonderful white canvas for you to paint your imagination as vividly as you can. And anytime you constrain that imagination because of circumstances, means that you've been overwhelmed by sensory input. You've been overwhelmed by the fake image, right, so to speak. So I know this isn't the question, but I'll keep on going on. But in Plato's allegorical cave, the shadows impressed on the cave wall are like what we see in the world today, right? Those are shadows of something else, right? So the signals of light I see when I look at my screen right now isn't you, Kate, right? It's just representations of my interpretations of you. So so you kind of start seeing, so whatever we see in life isn't what it is, right? That's just your interpretation of it. So so sometimes our circumstances can be that input can be so strong, you actually believe it's real, but it's not, right? It's just like any sensory input isn't real. It's a feat of imagination. So unshackling yourself from that and really saying, look, from this human experience, what could I paint? What beautiful image could I put on this white canvas, right? And then attempt to action it, because why not, right? You're this epic spirit in this human experience. Why constrain yourself, or why not brave that? Why not brave your imagination? You know, and so that's kind of I think I have begin to view the world as, every time you have imagination or you have a possibility and there's something within you that says don't, right? That's false information, right? Mm-hmm. Every piece of imagination is collaboration, right? Like your imagination says, go check, right? That it's not saying it's a good look, right? But sometimes because of fear, we don't, right? We feel like, oh, we shouldn't, or what happens if this doesn't happen? But who cares, right? Like, go find out. Go find out, right? Because it could, right? It's almost like the scientist who says, I don't want to mix those chemicals together because it may not work out. Right? That doesn't make any sense, right? So it's like, that's how we think about our imagination. Like, well, what if it doesn't work? No, the whole point is to find out, right? It's not whether it's, but I think what my observation is that our intuitions are much, much, much more intelligent than our intellects. And then what your imagination is telling you is information of a certain kind of complexity that's beyond cognition. And if you just stop fighting it and just go check it out and see what happens, I think that just seems to be, I think, a more scientific way to look at life, even though it doesn't sound okay.
There's much wealth here in this information. I wish I could parse out everything that you shared. The one thing that stands out is scientists, right? Scientists, you don't question, you just try, you find out what works, what doesn't work, and then you get wiser and more knowledgeable. And the way I sometimes see, society in general, we are told some form of lie, that we're less powerful than actually we are, that we were told we have to obey, and for what cause, we don't know. And so sometimes I feel like that those narratives that society feed us subconsciously, unconsciously, limits our ability to dream, dare to take action, listen to our intuition, and create without inhibition. And so thank you for that message for our corporate workers, executives listening. Chinedu, yeah. Well, our next question is more on a global level. What is your understanding of the current state of planet Earth or the collective consciousness? What do you think?
Oh, I never thought I'd actually live to experience this, right? Like all the things that the science writers had written about is coming true. On so many levels. And so it's like, I never thought in my lifetime the experiences, but I can share with you at least the way I think what is happening, and I think what will happen. Perhaps maybe that's one way of sharing, I think, the worldview. So what's happening now is that we're connected. The connections between people through information networks is growing through social networks, right? And there's this collective, as you said, human consciousness emerging from that, because of that, almost like an emergent quality from those connections. But I think so, and then many things that we hadn't, that we didn't understand before is slowly being unraveled, right? For, I'm sure, questions like, what is human consciousness, right? So that's happening, right? So there's this, it's almost like the secrets that physicists don't want to tell the rest of the world. But the observations of the hardest nosed scientists, right, would shock the most vivid imagination, right? What scientists tell us about this human experience would, and I think that's why no one's talking about it, because it is shocking. So I think that human consciousness is rising, and we're looking deep. We're looking more around in places that hurt, right? People that are suffering, and we're more able to bring together a collective consciousness to change and extend, in a way, love for people, love for animals, love for Earth on so many dimensions. So that, and I definitely see that. I see blockchain as a way that's expression of connection and coordination has exponential possibilities because of that. And there's a technical reason for it, but essentially what those blockchain systems will do, it'll create tighter and tighter feedback loops between human beings, and we'll be able to coordinate with each other. And going back to what I said about wealth coming from our human capacity to co-create with each other. So what blockchain will do, it will allow us to co-create with each other at a scale that human beings have never done before. One of the frictions of our imagination is the friction of trust, right? So I don't know you. I don't know what you can do. I'm not sure if I should be your co-founder. I'm not sure if I should invest in that company. I'm not sure if I should join that startup. I'm not sure if I should recommend my friend to this other person. All of that has to do with trust. And the technical reason, one way of describing trust is describing belief. Another way of describing belief is a probability distribution. So what blockchain will do, it will collapse the uncertainty, the probability distribution of co-creation. But we'll be able to do business with people all over the world seamlessly with zero, with 100% trust, right? Essentially, that's what, not 100%, but 99.9999% trust, right? Which would unleash this global wave of co-creation from human beings with their imagination, and people coming together to make those imagination come true. Obviously, there's a downside to this nirvana, and one is that those same coordinative systems can be used recklessly, can be used in a destructive way. So you talked about the school of design. So the first act of design is intention. And I think that's what is clear is if the intention around the design is off, right? Then the machine, the system you create will have its results, right? So this question of conscious use of our intelligence becomes the first design factor. So you could create a system that could do that, and you could create wealth for yourself and for your shareholders. So that's the question, right? But the question was the intention of that creation, and have you thought about what's the intention? Have you thought about it first? And if we can collectively align with intention, then that sets the I call it the objective function, right, for all of us, right? So we now have something to strive in, but is aligned with the global whole, right? It's aligned with the full intention of our collective sense of self, right? With humanity. So the way I see it in my head is human beings moving like birds in murmuration, like starlings in murmuration, moving together. right? And that symphony of coordination and can come with ability to trust each other, but also with ability to be intentional about the reason of our flocking. Why are we flocking together? And if we can get those two systems right, then I think then we're in a very we'll be in a time of wonderful abundance. I am obviously not Pollyannish about this. I know that human nature, or the nature of life, is game theoretic, so to speak, right? There's always this push and pull between yin and yang, between consciousness and unconsciousness, between light and dark, between lack of awareness and consciousness, right? So I'm not saying that the world will be in this blissful place forever, but I think that's the trend. That's the trend we're heading to.
Oh, wow. My heart is really happy listening to this message. The bird murmurating together, flocking together. And when we plug that into what is our collective intention, are we uplifting humanity? Are we serving the greater good? And when people gather together, there is, I find, a mutual trust. That so the humanness, oh, can I trust you, not trust, that becomes a secondary. But we're all aiming to uplift humanity. For example, SDG UN goal number 3, we know what we believe in. And so our humanness, we're imperfect beings, perfectly fine, but that takes a back seat, and we give more compassion towards some minor mistake, because there is a bigger vision we're working towards. And the nirvana, the idealistic society we can co-create, why not start with the imagination? And perhaps we can make it easier path for our next generation to come, and they can pick up the baton, and they can co-create even better society. And that's why my heart is really happy listening to you. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for this, Kit. And I think I mentioned to you earlier is it takes courage to have to do what you're doing now, and making this very intimate, personal dialogue we all go through, making it public and making it viewable and for other people to to know that those thoughts that they have, everyone has them, right? Everyone is wrestling with these issues of a finite life, a need for finite resources, but also knowing that we are much more than our flesh, and then what's to do with this time we have, on this earth. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I want to say that we met at M.B.A. Sounds True. You were the guest speaker, and I really have to admire the very successful businessman like you, who is creating companies in the corporate world, also aligned and speaking about spirituality. That's really refreshing. So Chinedu, our fourth question is something very practical. Could you please share one practical thing that our audience can implement in their lives right now that can uplift or benefit them right away?
Yes. Okay, practical thing. So one practical thing, especially for the entrepreneurs listening and all the creators, is that of empathy. Something, and the question is, so how do you, and when I say empathy, I don't mean it in I meant it in a very practical way, right? And then when I say practical is, I don't know who said this, but we all live lives of quiet desperation in many ways, right? So there's so much, as you said, there's so much suffering in this world. And for us to spend our days and time doing things that are okay while when we could have served another human life, right? Since we all have problems, why don't we have enough empathy for each other to look at each other's problems and try to solve it? And someone who does that well is an entrepreneur, and they become extremely wealthy, but they've also created wealth for other people by solving their problems. So the practical advice or the practical tool is empathy. It gets your sales, makes you hit your sales quarter goals for this quarter, helps you build your next startup, helps you increase your margins. It's the same thing. So the practical advice is empathy. And a simple way of having an empathy is to the next conversation you have with another human being, try to figure out what is the frustration to their imagination, and see if you can make it go away. Because that's where wealth comes from. So, and all we need to do is to have empathy for each other so we can pay attention and understand between their imagination and where they are now, what is the friction of making that story come true. That's it. Empathy. Have a conversation. So.
Oh, thank you for that. You know, the empathy piece, sometimes we start with good intention to serve other people, or sometimes from our own pain, we want to serve somebody who like me, like prototype the person, and then along the way we forget the empathy piece. So thank you for bringing us back to core value in business building, the empathy. Yeah, and once we do that, we can really in the right game, like we're avatars, we're playing this game as an entrepreneur, we're playing the right game, empathy in our backpack, and let's go. And you know,
yeah, I mean, for me, it makes so basically you can replace any company in the world, any company that's struggling for innovation is struggling because of empathy. So what innovation is, the first principles definition for innovation is your capacity to remove the friction of your customer's imagination. So any company that the times you've had a 10x experience, the times you've had raving reviews, the times you've doubled up the purchases and you've subscribed for a freemium from a free service to a premium service, every time you created a viral loop, every time you've done that is because there's somebody else, right, who's attempted to remove the friction of your imagination. And you're like, you tell your friend, oh my God, listen, I use this product, you won't believe what happened, right? And that feeling we have of that the place of imagination that product took you is what we truly value. So innovation, for companies looking for innovation, is really about empathy and understanding the unmanifested imagination of your customers. If you can understand that, that's the gold mine of innovation. So you can't, so to innovate without empathy is almost like throwing darts, blindfolded, spun around and saying, throw the dart, right? So that's why failure rates of startups are so high, because we confuse our imagination from our customers. And a successful company is the fulfilling of your customer's imagination. And then by doing so, your imagination gets fulfilled as well. And when we start with the projection of the painting, so to speak, without empathy, which is fine, it's like a painting, but we don't want a painting, we want something that has life, right? And that's the difference.
I want to tell you a mini story. As I was building this company in September last year, 2020, some advertisement came on, and this woman spoke about her story about how this bracelet helped her gain back her wealth and life momentum. And the story was 3 minutes long, and it was very, very personal for her. And you know what I did? Her empathy, I went and straight bought it. So
Yes,
yeah.
yes, 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 yeah. And but that human, it's like we think that what we want is out there, but it's really not, right? What we truly want is that vision, and it's very precise. Everyone has it. You have it. I have it. And when we feel the most giddy, when we feel like life is just wonderful, is when we feel like our stories are coming true, right? And that feeling is the feeling a great product does in the life of your customer. Like, my story is coming true. My imagination is coming true. I have to tell my friends. I have to go sign up. I have to pay more for this service. So, again, it's what I mean is, like, in some ways, even though we've come 360, but I feel like it's nothing is separate. Everything is the same. There's coherence in everything. So this idea of humanity is really the source of is the source of Jeff Bezos' wealth. Is the stuff of the fact that Elon Musk can muster up billions of capital. It's all mechanics of imagination, so to speak, right? So for me, it seems such a. I mean, obviously, this is something I've been thinking about for a while, but I think it feels this worldview. I think feels coherent, not just from just a human perspective, but through the rigor. At least I think I have done through the rigor of first principles of math and physics to kind of rationalize, in a way, my own life. So because if you had a choice of, as I said, if you have a choice of your human experience and what to spend your time on, for me, I was almost not, in a way, scared of doing it wrong, of not living the life that I would have wanted to live, right? So for me to do that, I had to really, in a way, step out of the race, so to speak, to understand what that intentional life looked like without constraints of circumstances, and saying, look, if there literally was no constraints, was no scarcity, was no fear, what would you do, right? Then if I believed what I believed, then I would step into that fear and see what happened, just like a great scientist. Yeah. And I think this love and magic and what we're trying to do is a step in that direction to marshal this system, and hopefully share it so other people can do the same. And I think if we all do that, then it will be this great concert of murmuration, of symphony between human beings. And I think that's the life in that world. I would enjoy living in that world, and I think that's the way at least I look at it.
I would certainly enjoy living in that type of world. I wish your company Love and Magic is a success and an impact that ripples outward to help lift many, many people in need. And truly, empathetic peace is a key to making abundant. And the key word I heard is just be at ease with wealth and be at ease with life, and the things that we envision for ourselves comes true magically and with time. Well, Chinedu, how do we, our audience, contact you or follow you?
Sure. Well, first of all, I've had such a wonderful time talking to you, Kate. So the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. And Chinedu Echeruo. And if you want to email me directly, it's chinedu@loveandmagic.com.
I'll be sure to include that in our video. And for our audience, thank you for tuning in. What a beautiful interview here. I feel really centered in my heart. and I have more hope for humanity. With Chinedu here. So for more interviews like this, visit us on lifeofemerald.com. And you can write me directly at lifeofemerald@gmail.com. Chinedu, do you have last word of wisdom for our audience to take away?
Sure. I always end my Friday sessions with this statement. So I just want to remind everyone that you're powerful creators. So thank you, Kate, and thank you all for listening to me talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinedu. All right, everyone, see you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.